Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and welcome to this edition of Revealing Prophecy. Each week we connect the dots of the news from around the globe with biblical prophecy and talk about what was, what is, and what is to come. The monologue is our original work, and all other articles are used giving credit to their respective resources. Inclusion of a story is provided for your information only and is not an endorsement of either the views of those authors or their theology. Visit ignitinganation.com for a full roster of live daily interviews and check out the Biblical Truth Library containing almost 1,000 hours of rich Bible teachings. Also check out our Israel trip of April 2nd to April 13th, 2022. You can visit ignitinganation.com/events and get the full itinerary and the registration form already online. You can use the contact form on ignitinganation.com to reach me with any questions that you might have. We encourage you to subscribe to the Igniting Nation YouTube channel, where you'll find over 1,400 interviews from our daily live broadcast. Here's a quick look at what we'll be covering on today's show. I'll be opening with a monologue, followed by Happy Shavuot, Happy Pentecost, the time of divine revelation from unitedwithisrael.org. 9 signs of the end times that are unfolding right in front of our eyes by Michael Snyder. From the Daily Jot, Trading Freedom for Fear by Bill Wilson, and then behind the scenes, Arab leaders signal annexation okay from Lauren Marcus from World Israel News. As we look at the Bible, it's a book of prophecy containing over 2,500 prophecies, which over 2,000 have already been fulfilled exactly as they were prophesied. Given that the Bible proves so reliable to document, there's every reason to expect that the remaining 500 prophecies, those slated for the time of the end, also will be fulfilled to the last letter. Who can afford to ignore these coming events, much less miss out on the immeasurable blessings offered to anyone and everyone who submits to the control of the Bible's author, God Himself? Would a reasonable person take lightly God's warning of judgment for those who reject what they know to be true about Jesus and the Bible, or who reject Jesus' claim on their lives? I recently interviewed a guest who had almost 40 years of experience with the church around the world, including a number of churches in Asia and across North America. His message was about the toxic church and the antidote. The conversation shifted to an even larger issue, and that is what happened to a theocracy, where God was the governing authority. All throughout Scripture in the Old Testament and the New, we see God as the one who is speaking to the leaders through dreams, visions, prophets, and His Word. The introductions of deacons and elders is actually a model inspired by Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. Here's what the Word says. Moses told his father-in-law about everything the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and about all the hardships they had met along the way and how the Lord had saved them. Jethro was delighted to hear about all the good things the Lord had done for Israel in rescuing them from the hands of the Egyptians. He said, "Praise be to the Lord who rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians and of Pharaoh, and who rescued the people from the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all other gods, for He did this to those who had treated Israel arrogantly." Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and other sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law in the presence of God. The next day Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood around him from morning till evening. When his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, "What is this you're doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge, while all these people stand around you from morning till evening?" Moses answered him, "Because the people come to me to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it's brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions." Moses' father-in-law replied, "What you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Listen now to me, and I will give you some advice, and may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to Him. Teach them His decrees and instructions, and show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave. But select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring every difficult case to you, The simple cases they can decide themselves. That will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. If you do this and God so commands, you'll be able to stand the strain and all these people will go home satisfied. Moses was called by God and not by man. And the men who served under Moses knew that Moses was God's man for that season. When Korah raised up a rebellion, God was swift to respond. When Miriam and Aaron complained about Moses, God was swift to respond. Moses was the model of a theocratic system where God was the one who was able to speak to Moses and direct his path. There was no board who hired Moses, no board to affirm or stand against the messages Moses brought forth. Yes, the people grumbled, and Moses took the petition before the Lord, and the Lord responded. It was clear to the people that it was not Moses, but God directing his path to secure the freedom and well-being of the people and to lead them into the promised land. For the Exodus generation, God was swift to make it clear that their grumbling and complaining and their idol worship cost them entrance into the promised land. But God's will would prevail regardless of the condition of the hearts of that generation. It would be a new generation with a new leader appointed by God and not a vote of a board with an agenda. Joshua led according to the instructions he received from God, and that was the model, a theocracy. Why is this something that I would comment about in relationship to prophecy? It is clear that man has his own agenda, and it's being played out in churches all over the world. Pastors are hired and fired, and because they're under the control of man and not God, the door is wide open for one to come who will bring a message that will tickle the ear and lead many astray. The more devoted many pastors are to adhering to the Word of God, the more likely they are to offend one group or another and put themselves at risk of being called before the board to answer for the message when the message came straight from God's Word. This is why there's 37 million churches in the world with 34,000 Christian denominations. Did Jesus not say a house divided against itself cannot stand? Each denomination was formed because of a difference in interpretation, an application of some part or parcel of how the Word should be applied, and in that process many were formed through congregational splits. Without a unified and unwavering commitment to the gospel, the door is wide open for one to come along who will bring a theology that all can get behind. It will sound like the Jesus that Paul preached, but it's not the same. It will sound like the Holy Spirit that Paul preached, but will be wholly different, and will bring a gospel similar to the one Paul preached, but will not be the same. With so many factions formed within the church, and so many agendas of man, there's become little room for God to clearly speak through an unbridled messenger. It will be no different than it was for the Jewish people for the 400 years from the last prophet to speak until the time of Jesus. During that time, the overwhelming appeal of the Greeks caused many of the Jews to assimilate, even though the Word clearly warned against this. This is and will happen again. Paul warned us in 2 Thessalonians 2, beginning in verse 1, "Now, brethren, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and our gathering together to him, we ask you not to be soon shaken in mind or troubled, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had come. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God and that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Do you not remember that when I was still with you, I told you these things? And now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth that they might be saved. And for this reason God will send them strong delusion, that they should believe the lie, that they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness." When we operate our churches as board-driven, man-controlled ministers, we thwart the work of God and His truth going out and open the door to every kind of doctrine that is appealing to man. Israel suffered because they wanted a human king, and Saul brought great strife to Israel. King David made it clear in Psalm 105:12, when there were few in number of little accountants, sojourners in it, wandering from nation to nation, from one kingdom to another, he allowed no one to oppress them. He rebuked kings on their account, saying, touch not my anointed ones, do my prophets no harm. Are we touching God's anointed and bringing harm to His prophets by managing the pulpit from the boardroom, as opposed to allowing the pulpit to be managed from the throne room? The famous quote, we have met the enemy and they are us, may apply more today than ever before as we look at the condition of the divided body of Messiah. I would encourage you to put God back in charge and let His plans unfold so we can find ourselves on the right side in the upcoming battle against the agenda of the one world religion, headed by the very one we do not want in power. And that, my friends, is today's monologue. And now for this week's stories. Happy Shavuot. Happy Pentecost, the time of divine revelation from unitedwithisrael.org. It's ironic that Shavuot is such a little-known holiday because, in fact, Shavuot commemorates the single most important event in Jewish history, the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. Shavuot is the culmination of a 7-week-long counting of the Omer that occurs following Passover. The very name Shavuot means weeks in recognition of the weeks of anticipation leading up to the Sinai experience. Since Shavuot occurs 50 days after the first day of Passover, it's sometimes known as Pentecost, a Greek wording meaning the holiday of 50 days. Shavuot, however, has no connection to the Christian Pentecost holiday. 3 millennia ago, after leaving Egypt on the night of Passover, the Jews traveled into the Sinai desert. There, the entire Jewish nation, 3 million men, women, and children, directly experienced divine revelation. God spoke to you from the midst of the fire. You were hearing the sound of words, but you were not seeing a form, only a sound. He told you of His covenant, instructing you to keep the 10 Commandments, and He inscribed them on 2 stone tablets from Deuteronomy 4:12 and 13. The giving of the Torah was an event of awesome proportions that indelibly stamped the Jewish nation with a unique character, faith, and destiny. In the 3,300 years since this event, Torah ideals, monotheism, justice, responsibility have become the moral basis for Western civilization. Shavuot is a full-fledged Yom Tov, a sacred day, and as such carries most of the same restrictions as on a Shabbat. No driving, no writing, etc. The exception is that food is prepared. For example, cooking is permitted. In Israel, Shavuot lasts 1 day. Outside of Israel, it is 2 days. Perhaps the reason for the relative obscurity of Shavuot is because this holiday has no obvious symbols of the day. For example, no shofar, no sukkah, no Hanukkah menorah. On Shavuot, there are no symbols to distract us from the central focus of Jewish life, the Torah. So how do we commemorate Shavuot? It is widespread custom to stay up the entire night studying Torah. And since Torah is the way to self-perfection, the Shavuot night learning is called Tikkun Leil Shavuot, which means an act of self-perfection on the night of Shavuot. At synagogue services on Shavuot morning, we read the biblical book of Ruth. Ruth was a non-Jewish woman whose love for God and Torah led her to convert to Judaism. The Torah intimates that the souls of eventual converts were also present at Sinai, as it says, I am making the covenant both with those here today before the Lord our God, and also with those not here today, from Deuteronomy 29:13. Ruth has a further connection to Shavuot in that she became the ancestor of King David, who was born on Shavuot and died on Shavuot. On Shavuot, it is customary to decorate the synagogue with branches and flowers. This is because Mount Sinai blossomed with flowers on the day the Torah was given. The Bible also associates Shavuot with the harvest of wheat and fruits and marks the beginning of the first fruits to the Holy Temple as an expression of thanksgiving. See Exodus 23:16, Exodus 34:22, and Numbers 28:26. There is a universal Jewish tradition of eating dairy foods on Shavuot. Various reasons have been suggested, among them the biblical book Song of Psalms in Verse 4:11 refers to the sweet, nourishing value of Torah by saying it drips from your lips like honey and milk under your tongue. The verse in Exodus 23:19 juxtaposes the holiday of Shavuot with the prohibition of mixing milk and meat. On Shavuot, we therefore eat separate meals, one of milk and one of meat. Upon receiving the Torah of Mount Sinai, the Jews immediately became obligated in the laws of ritual slaughter. Since they did not have time to prepare kosher meat, they ate dairy instead. In 1967, the Six-Day War ended just a few days before Shavuot. Israel had reclaimed the Western Wall, and for the first time in 19 years, Jews had access to the area surrounding the Temple Mount, Judaism's holiest site. On Shavuot itself, the Western Wall became open to visitors, and on that Memorial Day, over 200,000 Jews journeyed by foot to the Western Wall. In Jerusalem, no cars or buses run on Jewish holidays. In subsequent years, this pedestrian pilgrimage has become a recurring tradition. Early on Shavuot morning, after a full night of Torah learning, the streets of Jerusalem are filled with tens of thousands of Jews walking to the Western Wall. This tradition has biblical precedence. Shavuot is one of Judaism's 3 pilgrimage festivals, where the entire nation would gather in Jerusalem for celebration and study. This year, Shavuot begins at sundown tonight and ends at sundown on Saturday, May the 30th. Our next story, 9 Signs of the End Times That are Unfolding Right in Front of Our Eyes, by Michael Snyder. Global events are beginning to spiral out of control, and this has created a resurgent interest in what the Bible has to say about the last days. Throughout the scriptures, we are warned about apocalyptic events that will precede the second coming of Jesus, and a lot of people are wondering if that period of time is now upon us. All over the internet, people are engaging in all sorts of speculation, and lots of really bizarre theories are being thrown around, and this is causing a great deal of confusion. But all of this confusion is not necessary because the Bible is actually very clear about what is coming. Jesus had quite a bit to say about the time just before his return, and he specifically instructed his followers to watch for certain signs. He wanted us to understand that he knew about all of these things in advance, that he has a plan, and that he is in control. So there is no need to fear. In fact, Jesus told us these things so that we would not be afraid. 3 of the key chapters where Jesus discusses the events of the last days are Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. To set the stage for the rest of this article, let me share just 3 quick verses from Luke 21, beginning in verse 9. But when you shall hear of wars and commotions, be not terrified, for these things must first come to pass, but the end is not by and by. Then said he unto them, nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And in verse 11, and great earthquakes shall be in diverse places, and famines and pestilences, and fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. Could it be possible that we've entered a time where these signs are starting to be fulfilled? To answer that question, let's examine some of the global events that currently are unfolding. Number 1, wars and rumors of wars. War is coming to the Middle East, and it might be coming a lot sooner than most people think. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is very eager to annex portions of Judea and Samaria before the U.S. election in November, and the coalition agreement that he reached with Blue and White Chairman Benny Gantz allows him to do that as early as July. I believe that it will happen at some point in the coming months, and the Palestinians are openly warning that such a move will mean war. In fact, Mahmoud Abbas is so upset about this pending annexation that he just publicly backed out of all previous agreements with the United States and Israel. In an emergency meeting in Ramallah Tuesday, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas announced that due to Israeli plans to annex parts of Judea and Samaria, all agreements with Israel and the United States are null and void. This would include the Oslo Accords, which was the basis for the establishment of the Palestinian Authority. And Jordan's King Abdullah just told a German newspaper that annexation would lead to a massive conflict with the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. In an interview with the German news Der Spiegel, the Jordanian monarch reiterated that a 2-state solution was the only way forward as a resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. What would happen if the Palestinian National Authority collapsed? There would be more chaos and extremism in the region. If Israel really annexed the West Bank in July, it would lead to a massive conflict with the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, said Abdullah. This is something to keep a close eye on, and we also need to keep in mind that a major war between Israel and Iran could erupt literally any moment as well. Number 2, earthquakes. Our planet continues to become increasingly unstable, and Michael Snyder's regular readers know that he's particularly concerned about the west coast of the United States. It's just a matter of time before the big one hits California, and this week we did see 2 very alarming quakes strike just off the California coast. The first measured at a 4.7 magnitude. It hit at 11:56 p.m. Sunday, about 163 miles west of Eureka. The second earthquake was stronger, measuring a 5.5 magnitude, hitting the same area about 160 miles west of Eureka at 12:02 a.m. Monday. The second quake was at the same depth as the first earthquake, about 6 miles down. Overall, there have been 2,668 earthquakes in California and Nevada over the last 7 days, and that's definitely unusual. Meanwhile, large earthquakes continue to strike other areas of the globe with frightening regularity. For example, a magnitude 6.2 earthquake just rocked the Mediterranean Sea, and that made headlines all over the world. In the days ahead, the shaking is only going to get worse, but most people don't understand what is happening. Number 3, volcanoes. Mike Snyder has written about Mount Popocatépetl near Mexico City many times, and it's roared to life once again. In fact, it's being reported it was shooting hot ash 20,000 feet into the air on Wednesday. Keep a very close eye on this volcano because someday a catastrophic eruption will result in the worst disaster in the history of Mexico. Of course, this mount is far from alone. According to Volcano Discovery, 24 volcanoes around the globe are erupting right now, and a dozen more are showing signs of unrest. Number 4, crazy weather patterns. You may have noticed that global weather patterns have gone absolutely nuts. We're seeing record-setting droughts in some part of the world. In other areas, we're witnessing unprecedented flooding, and global food production has been greatly disrupted by one unforeseen event after another. For instance, this week India and Bangladesh are preparing for super cyclone Amphan to make landfall. On Monday night, that storm officially became the strongest storm ever recorded in the Bay of Bengal. Millions of people in India and Bangladesh are bracing for what is now being called the strongest storm ever recorded in the Bay of Bengal. Super cyclone Amphan is anticipated to make landfall in less than 36 hours, bringing destructive winds and heavy rain to a region already struggling with the corona pandemic. According to CNN, Super Cyclone Amphan officially became the strongest storm ever recorded in the Bay of Bengal on Monday night after intensifying with sustained wind speeds of up to 165 miles per hour. Even though Amphan has weakened slightly, the storm is still the equivalent of a Cat 3 Atlantic hurricane with wind speeds up to 115 miles an hour. Number 5, armies of locusts. Billions of locusts have been traveling in giant swarms the size of major cities across large portions of Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. These mammoth swarms can travel up to 90 miles a day, and when they descend on a farm, they can eat all the vegetation in as little as 30 seconds. Mike Snyder has written about these enormous locust armies numerous times, and they keep making headlines all over the world. This week, video of these locusts blocking out the sun in Iran was widely shared on social media. Terrifying footage of an apocalyptic swarm of locusts blocking out the sun in Iran has emerged after it was revealed the military could be called to fight a plague that may destroy at least $7 billion worth of crops. The chilling video shows a haze formed of millions of the bugs covering the horizon on a motorway in the south of the country. Number 6, the African swine flu. Before COVID-19 came along, African swine fever was the most serious pestilence affecting the planet. There is no vaccine, there is no cure, and it's killing pigs all over the globe at a staggering rate. In fact, approximately half the pigs in China and approximately 1/4 of all the pigs in the entire world have already been wiped out by this disease. Needless to say, this is having a tremendous impact on the global food supply because much of the world relies on pig meat as a primary source of protein. Number 7, famines and food riots. You know that things are bad when even the United Nations is using the word biblical to describe the famines that are beginning to emerge around the globe. The head of the UN World Food Program, David Beasley, is publicly warning that we are heading into the most humanitarian crisis since World War II, and he's telling us that we could soon see approximately 300,000 people literally starve to death every single day. He says if he can't reach if we can't reach these people with the life-saving assistance they need, our analysis shows that 300,000 people could starve to death every single day over a 3-month period about. This does not include the increase of starvation due to COVID-19. We've already witnessed very large food riots in Africa, and now they're starting to happen in South America. Number 7, famine and food riots continue. For example, check out what happened in the capital of Chile. The coronavirus hit Chile at a particularly delicate time. Back in October, the Chilean military deployed tanks and troops onto the streets of Santiago, the Chilean capital, and President Sebastián Piñera declaring a state of emergency to quell a violent uprising triggered by, of all things, a hike in metro fares. Can you imagine that in New York City? Now some of the nation's poorest are rising up against the government again in a violent protest movement over the lack of government assistance. Specifically, food shortages have left thousands of Chileans with nothing to eat, and mandatory closures have made it impossible for them to work or buy food. Global food supplies have gotten very tight, and they're only to get tighter in the months ahead. Number 8, economic collapse. Countries all over the world have locked down their economies in 2020 due to a fear of COVID-19, and that has plunged the entire global economy into a deep depression. Here in the United States, more than 36 million Americans have already lost their jobs. The Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago says that the real rate of unemployment in the United States is now 30.7%, and the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta is projecting the U.S. gross domestic product will fall by 42.8% during the second quarter of this year. Now that our economic bubble has burst, the dominoes are just going to continue to tumble, and the days ahead are looking quite bleak. Number 9, the coronavirus plague. This is the greatest public health crisis in 100 years, and it looks like this pandemic is going to be with us for many months to come. Already there have been more than 5 million confirmed cases around the world, and more than 300,000 people have died. Many had been hoping that the worst was behind us, but the head of the World Health Organization just told us that Tuesday was the worst day for new cases since the outbreak began. We still have a long way to go in this pandemic, Tedros said at a briefing in Geneva. In the last 24 hours, there have been 106,000 cases reported to the World Health Organization, the most in a single day since the outbreak began. Almost 2/3 of these cases were reported in just 4 countries. Jesus specifically warned us that there would be pestilences during the time before his return, and I believe in the future we will see even worse pandemics than this one. In fact, many of the signs that I discussed above will get worse in the days ahead. Just as birth pains can increase in frequency and severity as the time for birth get closer, we should expect many of the signs that Jesus warned about to increase in frequency and severity as well. But even in the midst of all this chaos that is coming, God will be moving, and I believe that the greatest revival in all of human history is still ahead of us. Our next story, Trading Freedom for Fear, by Bill Wilson. As we view the COVID-19 situation, we do not need conspiracy theories to bolster concerns about the curtailing of freedom. We just need to look at the facts before us. In no time in history has this nation been shut down for a flu. Since March 15th, all people carriers, the sick, the well, have been essentially locked down. It's changed our lives. The facts are that state governments, especially those with Democratic governors, have in the very least temporarily taken away freedoms. Fear has ruled over the hearts of many and still does. The question we must ask as Americans is how much freedom are we willing to trade for fear? The CDC, in its latest model, has lowered death estimates and infection rates. In fact, the latest CDC statistics indicate fatality rates at 4 per 1,000, down from the previous estimate of 10 per 1,000, and they were estimated on data compiled on April 2019, a month ago. Given the CDC infection rate versus fatality rates, the actual figure is less than 3 per 1,000, and that's 13 times lower than the World Health Organization predictions. In other words, less than 1/4 of 1% of Americans are dying from this pandemic. One death is too many, but based on facts, has there been an overreaction? Perspective. In 1918, for example, a worldwide flu epidemic attacked about 20% of the global population, leaving 675,000 deaths in the U.S. alone, nearly 7 people per 1,000. There are many news reports indicating that death tolls for this pandemic have been inflated, especially for states to money grab from federal government relief efforts. There are also reports saying the death estimates are too low. There are reports the CDC's latest estimates are politically motivated. There are reports that Democratic governors, in collaboration with the DNC, are purposely keeping lockdowns in place as long as possible to scuttle the economy and hope that President Trump can be defeated in November. More reports reveal another agenda: to put in place substantial socialist programs that expand government and its authority over citizens like you and me. There are no such provisions in these new laws and regulations that are being passed at state and federal levels. At some point, just based on the facts, not wild-eyed conspiracy theories, Americans need to decide how much freedom they're willing to trade for their fears. We are at a turning point in our constitutional republic. Freedom is difficult because it takes vigilant responsibility and constant care to preserve, as people are always trying to take it away. Fear is often a lever to pry open the protective vault of liberty. As Christians, we are not to be swayed by silly doctrines and ear-tickling. As in 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. We above all should not be trading freedom for fear. Our next story, behind the scenes, Arab leaders signal annexation okay, from the World Israel News. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to formally annex parts of the Jordan Valley and Judea and Samaria have sparked a public outcry from the Arab world. Arab world leaders warn that annexation, which is slated to move forward as of July 1st, could lead to civil unrest, regional instability, and violence. Last week, King Abdullah II of Jordan spoke to German newspaper Der Spiegel and threatened that Israeli annexation of the Jordan Valley and West Bank territories could lead Jerusalem and Amman to clash and may lead to cancellation of the Oslo Accords and the collapse of the Palestinian Authority. But behind the scenes, Arab world leaders tell a very different story. According to Israel Hayom, the rulers of Arab states, including Jordan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, are quietly accepting the annexation plan despite public statements condemning Israel's actions. A senior Jordanian official said to Israel Hayom, King Abdullah gave a speech a few days ago for Jordanian Independence Day, discussing the kingdom's tremendous achievements since its founding and its success in fighting the corona pandemic within Jordan. The only thing the king did not mention in his speech was Jordan's official position on the annexation of the valley and parts of the West Bank. In the interview he gave to the German newspaper, the king refused to declare the annexation would cancel the peace agreement with Israel. His silence on the matter is for a number of reasons. If Jordan suspends or cancels the peace agreement, the position of authority of the holy sites of Islam in Jerusalem would be harmed. The king also prefers to see the western border of the kingdom, the Jordan Valley, under the rule of Israeli military forces rather than Palestinian forces or rebel forces, the official said to Israel Hayom. With respect for Palestinian interests, the Jordanian national interest is more important to the king. He wants to continue maintaining the kingdom's status in Jerusalem in good relationships with Washington and President Trump. According to the same Jordanian official, the king does not want to see Palestinian unrest in Jordan, which would endanger the royal family. We've seen what's been happening in the West Bank since Abbas stopped the security coordination with Israel. There is great concern in Ramallah that Hamas and the West Bank militants will take over, like in the Gaza Strip. We don't want to see a repeat of what happened in Gaza after disengagement. Jordan will continue to voice its official stance against the annexation plan, mainly through public statements by the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister, and the King will allow the annexation plan to minimize damage to Jordan's interests. A senior Egyptian security official told Israel Hayom that many Arab world leaders see Iran and the impending threat of Shiite Iranian hegemony in the Middle East and more concerned about that than the Palestinian issue. The United States and Israel have great weight in the fight against Iran. A senior Saudi diplomat close to Prince Mohammed bin Salman said to Israel Hayom, the official Arab position will always be against any move that infringes on the rights of the Palestinians for an independent state or hurts the Palestinian national interest. But with all due respect to several dozen Palestinians living in the Jordan Valley, Arab countries such as Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and Jordan will not endanger the relationship with the Trump administration for them. Our assumption is that Trump will win the election and continue for a second term. The Palestinians have failed to take advantage of the sympathetic government they had during the Obama era. It's time for Abu Mazen and the old guard leadership to realize their global and regional interests are changing once again. the Saudi source said. If they again miss an opportunity to establish an independent and sovereign state alongside Israel because of annexation of the valley and some of the settlements, they will remain with nothing for another 20 years. And that, my friends, is this week's edition of Revealing Prophecy. This program, along with Revealing the Bible, are only available after they air through the Biblical Truth Library. Visit ignitingnation.com and check out the Biblical Truth Library and our guest lineup of daily broadcasts of Revealing the Truth. Follow us online through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can catch up on over 1,400 interviews and never miss any of our great guests. Your comments and questions are always welcome, and you can use the contact form found on ignitingnation.com. Don't forget our regular live broadcasts are Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. You can now watch a second channel on ignitingnation.com/live to watch a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week feed of some of our featured guests. Until we see you right back here for the next edition of Revealing the Truth, we thank you for watching and bless you with Shalom.